I really hope to hold this off until September, but here we are in June, beautiful weather, and everybody talking about recession and asking for insights in it. It's so bad, we're filming in a graveyard. Chris was in Sainsbury's this morning and the woman ahead of him had lined up all of her items on the conveyor belt, starting with the most important, the rice and the flour, and moving backwards to a treat, which was a small Tony Chocolonely bar for her daughter. And she told the cashier that she only had £15 and she ran out of money before she could buy the treat. And Chris is now sick to his stomach with regret that he didn't step in and offer to pay for the shopping, or at the very least the chocolate bar. And many of us are confronted by similar dilemmas when we think about the recession, the downturn and the cost of living crisis. What's going on out there and how do we help? Now, I want to take us back to 2008 and talk about the research that we did then, because after the global financial crash, we were going out into houses talking to people about the impact on their finances. And the first thing was that everybody talked a very big game about recession. They talked about changing their behaviours, whether it was cancelling or not booking holidays, whether it was stopping buying certain items, downgrading brands, swapping ice cream during the week for yogurt, running tumble dryers at night. Everybody had a list of things that they were doing to tackle the challenges they faced, except that when we asked them to really drill into their costs and what was triggering this change, many of them actually couldn't identify anything. Those people who lost their jobs, and of course there was a big rise in unemployment after 2008, 13% more people unemployed. Those people were very, very hard hit. But a lot of other people experienced a cost of living crisis much less than it is today. And some people who had mortgages and were on variable rates or remortgaging actually would reveal later on in the conversation that they were possibly hundreds of pounds better off a month. So the first thing to bear in mind with recession is that the psychological impact is huge, whatever the extent to which people are directly impacted. The second thing to bear in mind is, of course, that people are not impacted equally, but there is a gap between those people who are shouting the loudest potentially and those who might be suffering the hardest edge. Now, an HR director told me last week that she's hearing a huge amount from the most senior people and the men about wanting pay rises, and much less from the frontline staff. Of course, people on lower incomes are going to be more vulnerable to changes in fuel costs and in food costs. But the other groups you might want to bear in mind are those under 30, probably paying a very high level of rent, may have student debts, people who are having to drive in and out of work every day, versus perhaps those who are only going in 1 or 2 days a week now, who, yes, will see the price of petrol rise but may not need to use as much of it. And also consider those with very high childcare bills, because as discussed in previous weeks, those bills have gone up very significantly. There will be other groups in your team to bear in mind. So the second takeaway is really to silence the noise and distinguish between those people who are really struggling and those people who are feeling it, but it's more psychologically. And if you agree with that assessment, then really thinking through your medium and your long-term strategy is going to be everything. Next week, we're going to really dig into what boards need to understand to be able to cope and address the cost of living crisis and the recession. And the week after, we're going to do something massively more cheerful that's not set in a graveyard. I will see you next week.